Chapter 37, Solemn Supreme. Aunt Gloria loomed over Marcus in her dressing gown like a force 10 gale. "What do you know, Marcus? Where's Solemn?" She grabbed Marcus's sleeve. "Say something! Speak!" Detective Inspector Pierce led her back to her chair. Mum brought Marcus a drink of lemonade and led him to another chair, but he refused to sit down or take the drink. He shook his head and his hood fell back. Then he wiped his face on his sleeve and looked up and stared at me. I remembered to lift up my lips, which Mr. Shepherd says to do when you meet somebody new, because it means you can be their friend. But Marcus's lips didn't move, which meant he didn't want to be my friend. "Marcus is here to say sorry," Detective Inspector Pierce said. "He was too frightened to come forward earlier. He thought he'd get into trouble. Now he's told us what he knows. I have here the statement he made earlier, and his story starts out just as Ted worked it out." She nodded at Kat. "With Kat's help, I understand." "My help," said Kat. "I'd never have worked it out without you, Kat," I said. Detective Inspector Pierce continued. "Marcus's mum is outside in a squad car with another officer, waiting. She wanted you to hear his story too. When he's done, we'll take him home." "But I don't understand." Rashid squeezed his knuckles into his head. "Marcus and Solemn spent several hours together the day Solemn disappeared," Inspector Pierce explained. "Didn't you, Marcus?" Marcus nodded. "By arrangement. Then Marcus went back to Manchester on his own. Solemn didn't go, but he was supposed to, wasn't he, Marcus?" Marcus nodded again. "You see, Solemn had planned to run away." "No," Aunt Gloria moaned, putting her head in her hands. "But he didn't, not in the end. He changed his mind." Aunt Gloria looked up. "He changed his mind," she said softly. She nodded. "That's right. He changed his mind." "Do you want to explain, Marcus?" Detective Inspector Pierce asked. "Or would you rather I read out your statement?" There was a pause. Marcus put his hood back up so his face was hidden again. A voice you could hardly hear, said, "The statement, miss." So Detective Inspector Pierce read out Marcus's statement, and this is what it said. "Police transcript or statement made by witness Marcus Flood. My name is Marcus Flood, and this is the truth. Solemn is my best mate because before he joined my school last September they called me Paki Boy, but now they don't. I'm not from Pakistan. My mum's from Bangladesh and my dad's Irish, but that didn't stop Jason Smart grabbing my sandwiches every day and saying, 'What's the curried goat like today, Paki Boy?' and throwing them on the floor, even though they were just cheese and tomato. Then Solemn joined my class and sat next to me. They called him Paki Boy number 2, but he didn't take any notice, even when Jason Smart grabbed his sandwiches and threw them on the floor, saying they smelled worse than a yak's bum. The next day, Jason Smart opened his own sandwich box and there were thousands of maggots even in it. The whole class was in fits. Solemn went from Paki Boy number 2 to Mosher Solemn Supreme, and since I was his friend, we were moshers together. We had our shirts half tucked in, half out, the top moshers of 9K. When you're a mosher, you're not supposed to be keen. You sit at the back of the class and look dead bored. But with drama, it was different. We were the mosher keeners because Mr. Davison was so cool. He chose us to star in the school play at Easter, The Tempest. Mr. Davison played Prospero. Solemn was Ferdinand and I was Miranda. The girl. My voice hadn't broken then. I'd had a long dark wig to wear and a white dress, and every time I said I was certainly a maid, the whole class cheered and stamped their feet, and I'd rolled my eyes and everybody went, "Ooh la la." Mr. Davison said I was a comic genius. Then, after Easter, Solemn came back to school with bad news. His mum was moving to New York and taking him with her. I was gutted. I sat in science and technology thinking how I'd pinch some chemicals and swallow them whole, because I couldn't stand the thought of going back to being Paki Boy. Without Solemn, that's what I'd be. Solemn didn't want to go either. He asked his dad if he could go and live with him, but his dad said no. Then his mum booked the tickets. They were to fly out from London so that she and Solemn could visit these relations they hadn't even seen in years, called the Sparks. Solemn said the Sparks could burn in hell. I said at least he'd get to fly the London Eye, which was something we'd always dreamed of doing together. But Solemn said flying it without me wouldn't be any fun. That's when we had the big idea. We'd meet up, me and my Miranda disguise, ride the London Eye together, then he'd take the disguise and vanish, and together we'd run off, leaving his mum and the Sparks behind. We'd get a train back to Manchester together later that day, and he'd hide out somewhere, and I'd bring him food, and when his mum's flight had taken off to New York without him, he'd go and live with his dad, and his dad would have no choice but to say yes. Then he and I could go on being the top mushers of 9K. The first thing I did was ring Christy, my big brother. Christy's down in London, and he's always calling to ask for money, and Dad tells him he's not a bottomless pit, and to get lost. This time I rang him. I said if he met me at the London Eye and helped me and my mate Solemn carry out this joke we were planning, we'd give him a tenner, and he said yes. Solemn went down to London with his mum on Sunday. The next day I told my mum I was off out for the day with the Scouts, and she believed me, and even gave me some money. Plus, Solemn had given me his savings, so I had more than enough to buy 2 London Eye tickets. Then I hopped on an early train to London and didn't pay a penny because there's this trick I know to dodge the ticket collectors. I got off at Euston Station and found my way down to the river, and there was the Eye. You couldn't miss it. Christy showed up first. I put on the wig I'd worn as Miranda, and these slick sunglasses I bought in the Costa del Sol last summer, plus a jacket I'd pinched from Shannon, my older sister. Christy roared his head off and said I was a crazy transvestite, and Dad would skin me alive if he could see me. We bought 2 tickets. I didn't tell him that Solemn was going to run away, and I was going to hide him. I said we were playing a joke on Solemn's cousins, the Sparks. My voice had broken since being in the play. No way I could go up to these Spark cousins myself. You'd have spotted I wasn't a girl the moment I opened my mouth. That's why we needed Christy. Plus, he was an adult, and nobody would ask any questions when we bought the tickets. We'd got the tickets. I called Solemn to see where he was. "Hurry up," I said. "We're boarding at 11:30. He said he was just coming over the river, and minutes later he arrived. The mums went off for coffee just as we planned, and Solemn and the 2 Spark cousins joined the ticket queue. Christy went over, pretending to be a stranger, although he'd met Solemn once before. He gave Solemn the ticket and showed him his place in the queue, and then he dashed off to work because he was running late. I nearly died laughing, pretending not to know Solemn. I'd had to bite my cheek all the way to the ramp, and still Solemn didn't look at me, not until we were on the wheel itself. Then the capsule doors closed and we went up and we split our sides. It was magic. And air, light, the miles of London all to ourselves. We were happy. Then, when we got to the top, Solemn went quiet. He was looking straight at the sun. "Solemn," I said, "what are you staring at?" "Manhattan," he said. "It's London," I said, "not Manhattan." "It's my fate, Marcus. I've got to face it." It was sad then. It sounded like he'd changed his mind about swapping identities, disappearing and coming back with me to Manchester to hide. But when everyone turned to get the photo taken, he laughed and took the wig off my head and stuck it on his. I took off the jacket. He put it on. I straightened the wig, popped on the sunglasses. It took seconds. Nobody saw us. They were all looking the other way for the souvenir shot. Then the pod landed. We walked out right under the noses of the Spark cousins, and you should have seen their freaked out faces. Solemn put on this fancy walk, just like a girl. Next he cruised past where his mum was sitting having coffee, and she looked straight at him and didn't recognise him. I dragged him off before she noticed me, and we disappeared into the crowd. He got his mobile phone out and turned it off. "The day's ours, Marcus," he shouted. He thumped me on the back and took off the wig. He'd left his camera behind with one of the cousins, but between us we still had some money, so we bought a disposable camera at a chemist's and snapped one of me on the bridge. And then he bought hot dogs and Mars bars and cokes, and we picnicked in this park by the river, and I pretended to be a duck squawking, and Solemn said I was a comic genius. Then we went to this square where all the buskers perform. They were dead funny. Juggler on stilts with a tear in his pants, a magician with a silver globe that rolled over his body, a clown that did 10 somersaults and landed on his nose. After the show, Solemn gave the clown his last £1. We walked up Tottenham Court Road and found this shop that sells electric pianos. You could do organ, strings, trumpets and drum beats all at once. It was great. The best day I'd ever had. I wanted it to last forever, but it didn't. We got to Euston Station. That's when Solemn told me he wasn't coming with me. "I can't, Marcus," he said. "You can. It's easy. You hop on and hide in the bog." "It's not that. I can't run away. Not from my mum. She's some mum, my mum. But she's the only mum I've got, and it's not just her, it's the cousins Ted and Kat." "The Sparks? Thought you said you couldn't care less about them." "That was before I met them again." They're great, Cat and Ted. If I don't go back, they'll get into trouble for letting me go on the eye by myself, and Mum will be frantic. I didn't know what to say. People rushed by, dashing for trains, announcements droned on. I heard one for Manchester, my train. You're just a mosher wannabe, I said. Yeah, you're the real mosher, Marcus. I'm not in your league. He smiled. You did the maggots, didn't you? How did you know? When I was round your house last, your dad told me about his hobby, fishing. Then he gave me back Shannon's pink fluffy jacket and I put it in my backpack along with a wig. But I made him keep the sunglasses. They look good on him. A whistle blew. It was my train. We said goodbye and he hugged me. Run, Marcus. I'll send you a card from the Empire State Building. So I ran. Doors were slamming and I heard him shout after me, Don't let them call you Packy Boy. You're Mosher Marcus, remember? You're a comic genius. A guard saw me and shouted. I jumped on the train. I only just made it before they locked the doors. I saw Salim waving as the train pulled out. It was the last time I saw him. I hid in the toilet until after Stoke-on-Trent. At Manchester I got off without getting caught and went home. How was the Scouts, Mum asked. Fantastic, I said. Later that night, when I was sneaking Shannon's pink jacket back into her wardrobe, I found Salim's mobile phone in the pocket. He'd left it behind, just like he'd left his camera with the cousins. I'd mail it to him when he got to New York, I thought, and put it in my desk drawer. The next day the police came. They said Salim had gone missing. Mum was there. If I'd admitted to having been with Salim the day before, she'd have been livid, so I stuck to the Scout story. But after the police left, I started worrying. Where was Salim? Why hadn't he gone back to the Sparks house like he'd said? I tossed and turned all night. Then today I couldn't take it any more. I took out his phone, meaning to call his mum, and told her what I knew. So I did. I turned it on. There were about 20 voicemail messages waiting, all from her. She sounded terrible. I put through a call, but it rang, and then she answered, and I realised I couldn't face talking to her. I hung up and switched the phone off again. I hid it under my mattress. Then later, Christy rang me on my mobile. He said Salim's cousins had bumped into him at his motorbike show where he's working. He hadn't given me away, but if I knew where Salim was, I'd better go straight to the police and leave him out of it. He shouted his head off. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police. I'd get into trouble. Then tonight the police showed up, and they knew everything. Salim's cousin Ted had worked it out, they said. They said how it had been with the wig and the eye and the jumping on the train. It was like Ted Spark had been in my head, seeing my thoughts. And I remember Salim saying how he had some weird syndrome that made him think like a giant computer. So this is the truth and nothing but the truth. I last saw Salim at Euston train station. This is all I know. Marcus Flood. Chapter 38. Retracing the Steps. When Detective Inspector Pearce finished reading out Marcus's statement, it was 10:03 p.m. Aunt Gloria looked at Marcus with an expression that was off the Richter scale. Her bottom lip hung down, tears fell down that she didn't bother to wipe away. Rashid sat on the dining chair completely motionless, his head between his hands. Detective Inspector Pearce leaned forward, her knuckles tight. Marcus, she said, I want you to think. Take your time. Was there anything Salim said, anything that might give us a clue to where he went next? Marcus's hood shook. No, that's it. I've told you everything I remember. He said he was coming straight back here, honest to God. Did he say how? No, he had a travel card. He'd shown me it earlier. He pulled the hood down more over his face. The policewoman who was looking after him put an arm around him. I want to go home now, came his voice, muffled. Detective Inspector Pearce nodded. Take him home, she said. If he remembers anything else, call me right away. Marcus was led to the door, but just as he was about to go, Aunt Gloria stood up. Marcus, she said. The room went quiet. Marcus paused, but didn't turn round. I want you to know, Marcus, know it from me, Salim's mother. This was none of your fault. Then she sat down and groaned. Marcus shuffled over to her. I forgot, he said, to give you this. He held out his hand. In it was Salim's mobile. Aunt Gloria took it from him with shaking fingers. She held it up to her cheek. Oh, Salim, she whispered to it. Where are you? Marcus and his police escort left. Detective Inspector Pearce touched Aunt Gloria on the shoulder and said she was going back to headquarters to mount a London-wide search. The workers in the underground, the bus drivers who went through Euston, would be questioned. She'd leave no stone unturned, she said. Then she left too, and Aunt Gloria started to cry again. Then Mum sent Kat and me up to bed. We didn't even try to go to sleep. Kat sat up on the lilo. I sat up in my bed. I had the bedside light on. My head thumped. "Ted," Kat said. "What?" "You thought you'd found him and you hadn't. He's gone again." "Yes, Kat, gone. I don't like it, Ted," she shivered. "Inspector Pearce doesn't like it either." "No. All along she thought Salim had run away. Now she doesn't think so any more." "No. There are only two possibilities, Ted." "What?" "Either he ran away or he was kidnapped." "Kidnapped?" "Yeah. But why? Aunt Gloria isn't a millionaire, is she?" "Oh, Ted, you're so young. Kids get kidnapped for other reasons." "What other reasons?" "Stop looking at me like a duck that's forgotten how to quack." I stopped, tilting my head, and blinked. "What other reasons, Kat?" "Sex stuff." My hand shook itself out. Kat lay down, curling up. She didn't go to sleep. I heard no lapping like a dog drinking. After a long while I turned the radio on low. It was the shipping forecast at midnight. The general synopsis at 0000 hours issued by the Met Office. Fitzroy mainly northerly, 5 or 6 becoming variable, thundery, 4th Tyne Dogger 6 or 7. Down south the rain came in. The winds rose. I heard tree branches tapping the roof of our garden shed. I thought of the washing on the line, soaked again. Squalls of hard raindrops drummed against the window. I got out my leather weather book and looked up the section on the Coriolis effect. I heard Salim's voice at Euston Station talking to Marcus. "They're great, Kat and Ted." I thought of the boy on the slab. I thought of Salim somewhere in the great silent void, or lying somewhere out there in the growing storm. Two possibilities, hiding or kidnapped. "Switch it off, Ted, the radio, it's driving me nuts." It was Kat. I switched it off. "I can't sleep," she moaned. "Kat, you know the theories, the 9 theories?" "Oh, not them again, please." "One of them was right, wasn't it?" "Yeah, number 6, clever clogs. But you remember how I first thought of 8 and then later I thought of a 9th? So, maybe what you said earlier isn't true." "What do you mean?" "You said there are only 2 theories, either he's hiding or he's kidnapped. But maybe there's a third, like the 9th one before, one that we haven't yet thought of." Kat was listening now. She got up and switched on the main light. "Now you're talking," she said. "A third theory, there must be one." She walked up and down beside the lilo, thumping a fist into her palm, like a stone hitting paper in the stone scissors paper game you play when you're small. It was the one game I knew how to play, and it was my favourite. I made a scissors out of my hand. It was like the third theory we were trying to find. I thought out loud. Maybe Salim went missing again deliberately, willingly. Maybe Marcus is lying. Kat stopped pacing. She looked at me. Marcus was telling the truth. "How do you know?" "I just know it's a body language thing, Ted, like how I know that the 9th theory was wrong. It's the same now. I just know it was the way Marcus said. Salim didn't mean to vanish. He meant to come back here. He'd change his mind about running away." "So that means he vanished unwillingly." "Yeah." She sat down on the bed. "There are only 2 possibilities, Ted. There are only 2 theories. He either vanished of his own accord or somebody else's." "Somebody else's," I repeated, "which means that somebody out there is holding him." Holding him? I got out of bed and opened the window. "Somebody out there," I repeated. The northeasterly wind blew in. The papers on my desk flew across the room. A leaf came in. I thought about the Coriolis effect. I could smell the outside. I could smell London. "Somebody out there," Kat whispered, joining me at the window. She put a hand around my shoulders. "Or something." The gale came into the room for a few seconds more, then Kat shut the window again. "What do you mean, something?" I don't know, I said. Maybe something got in Salim's way and deflected him off course, like the Coriolis effect. That puts the wind off course all the time. And it's not a person, it's a thing. It's a thing you can't even see. Do you mean he met with an accident? I don't know, maybe. OK, he met with an accident of some kind and couldn't get home, but he'd have shown up, his body would have been found, or he'd be in a hospital somewhere. The police would have found him, unless... Kat's hands went up to her neck, her eyes went large and round. Unless what? I said. Unless he fell in the river. Unless he drowned. I thought of the cormorants ducking and diving. My hand flapped. You don't just fall in the river, Kat. There are walls all around. You have to throw yourself in, deliberately. Kat gasped. Her eyes got even bigger. Maybe Salim did. Throw. Himself. In. No, I said. Kat stared. I put my flapping hand on her soft, bony shoulder. No, I said. She breathed out. No, you're right. Salim wouldn't do that, he wouldn't. She shook her head. OK, this Coriolis thingy. What was it? I don't know, I said. I put my hands up to my head and shook it. I'm trying to think, but my brain's tired. Let's be Salim, Ted. Let's both imagine we're on Euston Station. Let's retrace his steps in our heads, remember? He doesn't know London well. He has a travel card, right? Right, Kat. He's waving Marcus goodbye. Got that? Yes. Then what? He looks at his watch. It's 4 o'clock, I said. And he knows Auntie Glo will be frantic, so he goes to get out his phone. And he realises he doesn't have it. He left it in the pink fluffy jacket. So he goes to a public phone, right? She frowned. Wrong. He didn't have the money, Kat. He'd spent it all. The disposable camera, the Mars bars, the Cokes, the busker. Yeah, of course. All he's got is a travel card, so he decides to just get home. He goes down the underground. How do you know, Ted? It's the fastest and the easiest if you don't know London. OK. He looks at the underground map. He's already been on the Northern Line this morning. He's not stupid, and it's simple. From Euston to our stop, it's direct. No changing. Easy. He goes to the platform, he gets on. Euston, Tottenham Court Road, Leicester Square, Embankment, Waterloo, I said. Then on to our stop, Ted. He gets out. He gets the lift. He goes back to the ground level, Kat. He shows his travel card, or he puts it through the barrier, and then he's back here. We're just round the corner from the tube. Kat blew out a hot, angry breath. It's useless, Ted. He might have got confused about which direction to take when he got out on the main road. I do. Kat stared at me. I don't think so. Not Salim. He'd walked the way with us just that morning. It's dead easy. Just 200 metres down the main road, past the barracks, and then left onto Rivington Street, and then our house halfway down. I nodded. Our house. Halfway down. Kat slumped back down on her lilo. It's useless, Ted. Useless, I said. My hand started shaking itself out. My head went off to the side. What did you say, Kat? I said. Say it again. Useless. Not that. What you said before from the bit about the main road. 200 metres down the main road, past the barracks, and then... She stopped. She stared. In the pod, Kat, at the top, Marcus said he was staring straight at the sun. He was looking south. He said he was looking at Manhattan, Kat murmured. He wasn't looking at Manhattan, Kat, or the sun. He was looking at something that reminded him of Manhattan, a big tower block. He was looking at the barracks. That's the something, Kat said. That's it. That's the Coriolis thingy, the thing that made him go off course. Then she shook her head. But Ted, he was anxious to get home. Surely he wouldn't have stopped and gone wandering off into the barracks. He likes tall buildings, Kat, I said. Kat nodded. He had his disposable camera. He might have wanted to take some pictures. I nodded. It was a fine day, Kat. Good views. Views which he knew soon wouldn't exist any more. Besides, Ted, he may have dreaded Auntie Glo going ballistic when he showed up. A little delay was maybe appealing. He goes into the barracks just for a quick look. Then what? Dad came home that evening, I squeaked. He said he made it secure. He locked it up. He hasn't been back since. He said he'd been down Peckham today, on another site. He locked it up, Kat. with Solemn inside it, and nobody's been there since. Solemn's in there, Cat, trapped, and the concrete crushers are going in. Tomorrow. Chapter 39. Night Rain. Mother of God, Cat shrieked. She ran out of the room. Dad, Mum, come quickly. When I talk to people about something I've found out, they don't listen. When Cat does, everybody listens. Within 5 minutes, everybody was half-dressed and out of the door into the driving rain. Dad brought 2 torches and his massive bunch of work keys. We ran down the road, Rashid, Aunt Gloria, Mum, Dad, Cat and I, with coats flapping, umbrellas blowing inside out, hearts pounding, hopes rising, my hand shaking itself out. Dad's hand trembled as he undid the padlock. A great howl of wind moaned its way round the big dark tower above us. Mum held a torch. We crossed a muddy strip of grass and peeled around the back of the building to the entrance. Another key, another shaking hand. "Hurry! Hurry!" screamed Aunt Gloria, almost grabbing the keys off Dad. We were in. The door closed behind us. Dad played the torch around the lobby. It stank like bad toilets and dead animals. Another key to a room set back in the darkness. It was like an engine room. Pipes, boilers, cables, fuse boxes. It was silent like a morgue. The torch picked out what Dad was looking for, a cupboard. He unlocked that with a 4th key. There was a switch. He turned it on. Then he turned on a row of switches by the door. Light. The tower block lobby came alive. Yet another door to the stairwell, another key, more lights. "Solemn! Solemn!" we shouted. Up and up, floor after floor, Cat and I were the fastest. I knew where Solemn would be. He'd be right at the top on the 24th story. By floor 15 I was rasping. Cat was half a flight ahead. I heard her moaning and whimpering. "Solemn! Oh, Solemn!" Our lungs had given out by the time we got to the top. Cat had a stitch. "Solemn," she said. It was little more than a whisper. There were 4 doors on each floor. The first 3 we tried were locked. The 4th was ajar. I felt something scuttle past my foot in the darkness. "Solemn," Cat faltered. She grabbed my hand. It was clammy and cold, but it kept my hand from shaking itself out. "Don't go in there, Ted. I don't like it. I don't like the way it smells. Let's wait for Dad." We waited hand in hand on the 24th story by the open door, the door that led into darkness. It was the longest wait of my life. The theories, all of them, the photos, the words on the T-shirt, the pods on the wheel, were like floating strands in my brain. There were no more theories. This was the last one, the only hope. My heart thumped, my eardrums pounded. It was the sound of time. Dad came, panting. He had the torch. He staggered into the dark doorway. Cat and I crept after him. "Solemn," he said. He pushed through another door. The torch beam quivered across some grimy walls. "Solemn?" That's where we found him. He was shaking all over, just waking from sleep. He was curled up like a fetus in an empty room on an old mattress that the last people to leave the barracks had left behind in the flat. He was alive. Aunt Gloria rushed in and hurled herself down on him. "Solemn," she sobbed. "Oh, Solemn, my love, my love." Chapter 40. After the Storm. Voices, tears, reconciliations, I remember them as waves of words going back and forth, running over my head, around, past me, through me. I walked to the window and pinched my nose to block out the smell of a building that Dad said was sick, and I had to agree. Somewhere, pigeons cooed. They got in through a broken window. Cold air brushed my cheek. Somebody took me by the shoulder. It was Dad. While Mum and Aunt Gloria helped Solemn to his feet and wrapped him in their coats, we looked out. The gale blew itself out. Some new push of air, cool and calm, stole in. The moon appeared from behind a bank of cloud. That's when I saw it. London, from the 24th floor, lit up like frost on glass. The dome of St. Paul's was a luminous curve straight ahead. To the left was the White Eye. It was motionless, a giant bicycle wheel in the sky that did not turn. And we went home. In a hoarse, shaky voice, Salim told us what had happened. He had starved for nearly 3 days. He'd found water in a toilet cistern in the flat. That is what he drank. He tried to shout from the window on the 24th floor. Nobody heard. Nobody looked up. He tried to get into other flats. They were all locked. He tried to get out of the stairwell. The door at the bottom was bolted. He tried to break out of the building 1,001 ways, but he couldn't. He was trapped. All he could do was wait and hope. He sat where there was light and a view, in the empty flat on the 24th floor. He slept on the abandoned mattress despite its dank smell. He had half a Mars bar left from his outing with Marcus, a disposable camera, the clothes he had on and nothing more. Then our doctor came to check him over. He pronounced him shocked but strong. He said how brave Salim was to have endured what he had and prescribed a bowl of soup and bed. Dad phoned the police and told them how we'd found him. The next day, Aunt Gloria, Rashid and Salim talked quietly together all morning in the living room. I don't know what they said, but afterwards Aunt Gloria announced that Salim wanted to give New York a trial period of 6 months. This time it was his wish, she said, not just hers. Rashid left. He thanked us for what we'd done. He said he'd never forget. He and Salim would visit us often, he promised, when Salim came home for the holidays. As he walked through the front door into our postage-stamped front garden, he turned and looked at Aunt Gloria, who stood beside me. Aunt Gloria's hand fastened itself hard on my shoulder. "Gloria," he said. "Rashid," she said. A moment passed. Rashid shrugged. His eyes were like Salim's, I realised, dark lozenges. "Enjoy the big apple," he said. The corners of his lips went up very slightly. He waved a hand. "We'll try, Rashid," she said. "Goodbye." "Goodbye." His hand dropped to his side, his shoulders went down. Then he turned away and walked down Rivington Street. My head went off to the side as I watched him recede, and he looked back one last time before disappearing round the corner. After Rashid left, Salim asked to see Kat and me. He was plumped up on pillows on the sofa. His faint moustache had grown back more noticeably than before. I remembered what he'd said about grass and lawnmowers. He wanted to know everything, how we'd worked it out. He smiled at each bit of the story, especially the bit about the motorcycle show. Kat told him most of it. When she got to the end, she said, "Salim, I just have to face it. My weirdo brother's a genius." Salim looked at me. "You're a neek, all right, Ted. Only it's got nothing to do with nerds and geeks. It's short for unique." Kat and Salim laughed at that, so I did too, and that was when I knew I'd 5 friends now, not 3. Mum, Dad, Mr. Shepherd, Kat and Salim, and I was pleased. "What was the worst thing about being trapped in that block, Salim?" Kat said. Salim drank back into the pillows. "Oh, you really don't want to know." "Yes, we do," Kat said. "The noises, I guess, the noises at night. I'd lie on the mattress and hear the wind, moaning around the tower, up, down, everywhere. Then the patters and sighs started, odd gurgles, noises I didn't understand. I couldn't place them. Scuttles, creatures scooting across walls, rats, cockroaches, and flaps of wings, bats or birds. I lay in the dark. I put my jacket over my head. I buried my ears under my arms, but I could still hear them. Then something landed on my cheek, just a scrape. I sat up and screamed my head off. Okay, Kat said, blocking her ears. "Sorry I asked." "It wasn't all bad," Salim said. "No?" "During the day it were okay. I watched the weather. I was close to the clouds. There was this thunderstorm. I saw lightning flickering all over London, and these dark sheets of rain moved in, and then the sun came out. I took photos, buildings and sky. One half of London was dark, the other was light and sunny. The river was in both halves, a thin silver line, and what divided it all was the eye, big and white. I took a photo, Kat, the last one on the disposable camera, but the best I ever took." That afternoon, Kat and I had a final visit from Detective Inspector Pierce. Dad and Mum sat and listened while Kat told her everything that we'd thought and done. Detective Inspector Pierce's lips turned upwards at the end. She looked up at me. "Some brain," she said. She looked at Kat. "Some action," she said. "You two have everything it takes to make first-class police detectives." "Dunno," Kat said, dubious. I fancy the fashion trade. I told her I was destined for the Met Office. Pity, she sighed. My colleagues say I'm a good detective. You have to be if you're a woman in the force. But you two have taught me something. Youngsters are worth listening to, more than a legion of adults. If it weren't for you two, Solemn might still be trapped in that tower block, and by now the concrete crushers would have done their worst. I dread to think. She shook her head. We looked high and low, north and south, and all along he was right around the corner. Then Dad said, I just don't understand how Solemn got himself locked in like that. I had a security guard posted at the gate, and I checked each floor one by one to make sure it was empty. It was a few phone calls later before we knew what had happened. Solemn said that as he'd walked past the block, he'd noticed the gate to the boarded-up fence ajar. It was a magnet. He thought of the 24 floors, the views that would soon no longer exist, his disposable camera. He'd be only a few minutes, he promised himself. He'd slip in. No one was about. He'd found the main entrance, then the door to the stairwell. He'd cruised up the stairs. Meanwhile, Dad had been checking each floor was vacated, the last tenants all gone. He'd posted his colleague Jackie Winter as a guard at the outer gate, while he'd gone up, using the stairs, until he got to the top. You rang me, Faith, to say that Solemn had gone missing just as I was on the 24th floor in the vacated flat. I remember rushing out. I left the door to the flat unlocked. It was no big deal since the building would be secure from below. To save time, I took the lift back down to the lobby, just as Solemn was coming up the stairs, I guess. I locked all the doors in the lobby area. I turned off the water and electricity. I went outside. I locked the main entrance. There was Jackie by the fence gate where I'd left him. We padlocked the gate together and left. Solemn swore he'd seen no sign of a guard. Jackie Winter was questioned. At first he denied having left his post, then he broke down and admitted it. He'd nipped to the newsagents. He'd only been gone 2 minutes. He'd been dying for a smoke and had run out of fags. He lost his job. Chapter 41. The Last Turn of the Wheel. 2 days later we saw Solemn and Aunt Gloria off to the airport. Solemn grinned at me and shook my hand hard before they went through passport control. Mr. Unique, he said, see you in New York. Mum and Aunt Gloria embraced in their usual embarrassing way. Dad went to kiss Aunt Gloria on the cheek, but missed and kissed the air instead. Aunt Gloria gave Kat, then me, her hot, hard hug. Just as I squirmed away, she grabbed my wrist. Here, Ted, she said. Take these and throw them away. I don't need them any more. She thrust her cigarette holder and cigarette case at me and fanned her face, as if she could no longer stand the thought of smoke. Then she smiled, and I remembered to smile back, and that was how Aunt Gloria became my 6th friend. Come on, Mum, Solemn said. We'll miss our flight. He tugged her sleeve. They waved a last goodbye. Solemn looked at me over his shoulder as the guard checked his passport. We were eyeball to eyeball, just as we'd been when we'd first met. He winked. I'm not sure if I got it right, but I scrunched up one of my eyes as hard as I could. Their plane took off as a large Atlantic high asserted itself across Lundy and Fastnet. It stayed fair with moderate winds for the duration of their flight. When we got home, Dad said he was going to spend the weekend in bed, but he didn't. He began cooking eggs, whistling the Laurel and Hardy theme tune, as if the hurricane that was Aunt Gloria had never been. I'm making my special omelette, Faith, he said, the one you used to like when we were dating. Mum rolled her eyes, but smiled at the same time. Will I like it? Kat asked. If your mum does, you will, Dad said, because I know and Ted knows too, don't we, Ted? I said. Know what? Mum and Kat are like 2 peas in a pod. That's why they argue all the time. Mum looked at Kat. Kat shrugged. Takes one to know one, she said. They smiled. After the omelette, which was very good to eat, Mum announced that Aunt Gloria and Rashid wanted Kat and me to have a present for what we'd done. Kat admitted to the 50 quid we'd not given back since being at the Eye. She gave Mum what was left over from our investigations. Mum laughed when she heard how we'd spent it. She insisted it didn't count. We could still have something else. What? Anything? Anything within reason. I chose a weather watch. It's an amazing invention. It tells the time, but it also has an excellent compass and different modes. When you press a button, it becomes a mini barometer, showing the air pressure. My weather predictions have increased in accuracy by 31.5%. Kat said she wanted a motor scooter. Mum shrieked, "Don't be ridiculous, Kat, you're too young." "Oh, Mum, you said within reason, Kat." OK, can I have my hair cut and coloured at Hair Flare then? Hair Flare was where she'd gone for a consultation when she'd gone AWOL from school that day. Mum sighed. "All right, Hair Flare it is," she said. Kat came home later that day with her brown hair cut into different lengths, with a long uneven fringe that kept falling over her eyes, and dirty blonde streaks like rain makes when it goes down a window pane. I wondered how she could see to walk. Mum's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Dad glanced up at Kat over his newspaper and disappeared behind it again. The newsprint shuddered. "Don't you like it?" Kat said, her voice going upwards. My head went off to one side. "Kat," I said. "What?" I could have said she looked like a sheepdog that had forgotten how to bark, but I didn't. "It's a real cool haircut, Kat." Through the strands of fringe she smiled. My third lie. I wrote it down in my new silver folder called My Lies. It's in my desk drawer, and it's got a lot of growing to do. Just as planned, the Barretts got knocked down. Our neighbourhood looked odd at first, as if a giant alien presence had been beamed to another planet, leaving behind naked sky. Then I realised, since it's gone, there's a different view. When you walk down our street, just as you turn onto the main road for an instant, you see half the eye. You almost have to pinch yourself. It looks unreal, as in Kat's dream. It's moving so slowly you'd hardly know. The capsules of glass and steel glitter. The white spokes wobble in the sun's glare. And always, Solemn's silhouette is there, hovering in the centre, waving to us just as he did that day. Solemn or not solemn. Solemn supreme. It's as if the moment he boarded, 11:32 a.m., 24th of May, floats on in a time warp, somewhere in my brain.